Hey everybody, this is PD from the Spinner Rack, and we also have
Calvin Ellis ready to rock.
today we have something that Cal wanted to talk about, the comic book hero. What do you want to talk about as far as CGC comics?
Oh, the coming of 9.9 and 10.0 books with regularity from CGC, or so as the YouTubers say is going to happen.
Is that the actual Mint comics? They're actually scoring a Mint comic? The
Well,
uncoveted son you can never get, the Mint comic?
yeah, supposedly, we got to look at the video and then we can see what the guys are saying. Because take this with the grain. Because remember, YouTubers, you don't get clicks and views and likes and comments because you're posting stuff that isn't clickbait, unfortunately.
Well, with that said,
9.9 and the ever elusive 10.0. Today, we're going to talk about manufacturing defects. Now, one would assume that because books come directly from the printer or the manufacturer, that the books are going to be perfect. That's not necessarily always the case. So today, we're going to discuss the differences between a 9.8, a 9.9, and a 10.0, and pull back that curtain and show you CGC's grading process. Now, there are times where we get bulk submissions sent to CGC, either directly from the publisher or the printer themselves. You see, they come in these handy outer boxes, and inside here is another inner shipping box. And if I open this up, this particular case has a...
Yeah, pause. Yeah, that was a little loud. The video on the volume on the video, you probably didn't hear me over it. Anyway, so a lot of times guys will go to websites, and these are something like Midtown Comics or Midtown Comics when it comes to mind right now, or Big Time Collectibles, any one of these sites that is a regular comic seller, and they'll offer pre-sales of 9.9 or 9.8 books. Usually it's 9.8, but what usually happens is that these guys they have their own covers made. And when they have their own covers made, they get shipped directly to them. So they're not taking this off the rack. This is already in box. Okay, so it's because of that, they have a better chance of getting a 9.8, or at least they believe they will. And then they ship everything directly to CGC. It's all boxed. They don't take any. They may take it out just to count, but they ship everything there. That's how they do it. So it's not like, hey, there's some graph with CGC. They are just playing the odds. They're gonna go. They'll have everything screened. Anything that has the potential of a 9.8, those are the only books that are going to get graded, and everything else goes back to the sender. Okay, just so we're clear on that.
okay, let's keep going.
has about 160 raw copies, all pre-packed, directly case fresh from the printer. Now that we have the books safely removed from the inside packaging, I'm prepping them by putting them in piles. You notice a backboard underneath here so they can stay.
They did not want to show you opening that up. It's like someone trying to show you how to put in what's that thing? A contact lens. No matter how it looks, it's gonna look rough. Ripping the plastic off, and what did they do? They don't know what they're doing. They're not hermetically sealed in gloves, in the glass sealed.
You're still thinking about what is it? That video they had where they had Superman 1, and and all of a sudden everybody was a professional. All of a sudden everybody was a professional who knew exactly how to handle a comic book. Yeah, I remember that.
Even now, they probably say, but they came out the box perfect. From shipment, dropped right into the box. Now his hands are on it. 9.6.
They can safely be moved across the table. And one of the first things that I'm going to be looking for is, with them all lined up in the same direction, I'm going to be looking at the spine corners. Looking for that color breaking spot. As you can see, as you move your eye up and down along all the corners here, you can see the ones that do break color with the white showing versus the ones that do not and have the solid, sharp corner of a spine edge that we're looking for books that might grade out higher above a 9.8. What I've done here is a preliminary stacking process where I've gone through and I picked the ones that don't have color breaking marks on the top and bottom spines. And then this pile right here would be that one pile. And then these piles over here would be the ones that show a little bit of white, and those would knock it out of the 9.9, 10.0 range, but not necessarily the 9.8 range. So once I have these narrowed down, I will save the higher grade ones for after.
What, you're going to tell me there's not all 10.0? What do you say?
No, no, most books are 10.0. That's why it's supposed to be so hard. That's why it's such an expensive and rare, treat to actually get a book that high. But you want to pay attention to what he's doing. Well, my experience is that the majority of guys, like 99.9% of guys who submit, I'm sorry, 99.99% of guys who submit to CGC do not know how to grade a book. They haven't had any training. Okay. They don't know how to grade a book. And the other problem is that guys will grade books that have no business being graded. So it's a key book. Say it's like Incredible Hulk #2. Okay, great. You think this is a great book? I should go. I'm going to grade it. I'll get money on it. Do you know how to grade this book? Meaning you can look at it, evaluate it, and know if it's a 3.0 as opposed to an 8.0. Can you look at this book and tell if it has any restoration, which will definitely affect the value of the book? If the answer is no, you shouldn't be sending this book off. You really shouldn't. And CGC has a screening. I don't know exactly if that screening process is the same as when I was submitting more frequently, but they have a screening, so they'll be able to tell you, yeah, this has restoration. Don't get it graded if that's the case. But these are things that you're supposed to be doing. So right there, and what he's doing is just like a very simple thing, just looking at the corners. He's looking at the corners. Are the corners blunted? Is there any sort of white? And he's doing a quick triage because you're still going to, that book that he's decided, okay, this can actually go for a 9.8. He's still going to need to look that book over again because right now it's in a pile of other books. So he's just doing a quick triage like, no, these guys over here are never going to make it. These are potentials. These are not 9.8 or 9.9s. These are potential books. And most guys just don't do it. They look, it looks good to them. They send it off. And, it's not a very difficult thing to learn, but a lot of guys, the majority of guys overwhelmingly do not know how to grade a book.
All right, so I'm just going to ask you this question, just so we get it out there for anyone watching. So you've had some books graded, right?
Yeah, I've had books
And
graded.
you've also, graded some stuff on your own on average. So I lead all this to say, what is your average in comparison to the slab books that you've got? How close do you feel your average is? Is it a high average, 90, whatever you say?
Over 90. Over 90. I would only when I first started grading, I didn't know what I was doing. So I would just look at a book. The book looked okay. It looked like I could make some money off of it. I sent it. And then, like with most guys, it would come back mid-grade or dramatically lower than I expected. So I went and got training. I got trained in heritage grading evaluation. So I went and I did that training. And you have to look over where you really need to learn is low to mid-grade books. That's where you really need to understand. Once you have that, you have a better understanding of how to grade a book because it's very easy to grade a 9-point book, a 9.8 book. It's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. But to understand, okay, these are things to look for. This is what, if this has this type of discoloration, what's foxing, this is how it affects the grade. So those are important things to know. But the last time I didn't do this for myself, but I did this for someone else. He had a bunch of Uncanny X-Men 266, first appearance of Gambit. He asked me if I would look them over, choose the books that I thought would come back 9.8, and choose the ones that I didn't think would come back that high of a grade. So I went through and he had a few of them. He had lucked out and gotten like a box with like about anywhere between 12 and 20 copies. So, I looked through all of them. I made my selection. Okay. It was a good number too. It was over 10 that said, yeah, these I'm pretty sure will come back 9.8. Every single one that I selected for 9.8 came back 9.8. Every single one.
All right, cool. I thought the listeners would be interested in that so they can understand that it's just not, and letting them know that there's ways you can learn how to do it right rather than just the site tests or what you look from the.
I also say this because I don't grade as much as I used to. I am hyper selective about the books that I will send in. And so, because one, I can make my money without grading, so that's number one. But then number two, it's a really big crapshoot because if it comes back a 9.8, great. If it doesn't, well, what are you going to do with it? Now you've got a well-preserved comic that nobody wants.
All right, so let's see.
for
What else is
after,
going on?
once we establish manufacturing defects and any other consistencies as far as defects that go along with all the books on this particular print run. As I'm going through these stacks, what I'm looking for is sharp corners and a tight spine. Now, in this particular book, all of these books are made beautifully. They're on a nice heavy cardstock cover, and they hold up really well in shipping. So what I'm looking at here is a straight spine, zero defects on it.
Okay, pay attention to what he said. He said it's nice, heavy cardstock cover. So if you've ever given somebody a card as a birthday gift, that's the type of cover he's talking about. Now, that book has a much higher chance of becoming a 9.8 or a 9.9 book. Why? Because the paper's stronger. It's much stronger. If you look at the books from the Copper Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, no, totally different thing. The paper that we have today has less chance of having, if you were to put a piece of tape on the cover of a lot of these books, that tape would be able to peel back off without any damage to the cover. Whereas the older books, you know, more than likely you would just have to leave it there for fear of it pulling, tearing off the actual cover art. So if it's a cardstock cover, it's already got a nice it's got a better chance of coming back a 9.8. This is the same thing with a foil cover as well, because the foil is stronger. So there's less chance of it being ripped, torn, having an indentation. Okay, so these are books, when you see a book and it comes back a 9.9 and it's a foil cover, I'm like, yeah, it should. That book is much more suited towards, being a higher grade than something of regular thinner paper. So that's something to keep in mind.
All right, this is a side note. Totally, I just have to ask because I saw it online. Someone had I think it was X-Men 141, the Days of Future Past, in a slab, but it was clearly the facsimile edition. Should CGC actually this is not on topic, should they allow people to spend their money on, I understand Deadpool sign maybe, but should they allow them to just take any old reprint and put it into the slab and say, hey, wait a second, getting a 9.8 on this book really is not going to help you out? Should they push some stuff back and say, you're doing this for the wrong reasons?
No, the answer is no. CGC is not there to be, your mother or your father or Jiminy Cricket. CGC says, look, we are going to grade whatever you submit as long as it's something that we can grade. If it's a treasury edition, we don't grade those books. Sorry, that's going back. We don't deal with those books. You want to grade it? We're your guy. And then some of the reprints, actually, if you get a 9.8, you can actually get some decent money for it. However, it's got to be a 9.8. And I do believe that's where a lot of guys miss the bus. If it's not a 9.8, okay, and you're grading it hoping to get a 9.8, and you don't know what you're doing, you're just giving it some eyeball time, or even worse. One guy wanted to argue with me that the book I was selling wasn't the grade I said it was. And I was like, well, how do you sort it out? He was like, well, I took a copy of a CGC book and I put it next to it and it doesn't look the same. I'm like, you've got to be out of your mind. If you're grading a book by looking at a CGC copy that's encapsulated, without insulting anyone, that is just ridiculous, because no two books are the same. So you can't judge it based on that. You've got to look at the book yourself. And if you don't know how to grade, well, again, you have no idea what you're doing. So, again, it's very important that you know how to grade.
Okay.
Zero defects on it. And then you look at the corners here. The corners up here by the Boom logo, and then the bottom, very nice and sharp. So my eye is going around all four corners. No surface wear whatsoever. The only spot that I can see is that tiny little spine right there. We have a little bit of white showing. But not necessarily a book that cannot still achieve a 9.9. Even though these cases come directly from the printer, there is a possibility that they can be damaged in the cases they come in. So in this particular book, as I'm looking for those sharp corners, if you notice on the bottom spine there, you can see a small impact crunch right down there by Black Ranger's foot. Now, if this particular book was going through a 9.8 pre-screen, that would be considered a handling defect that would take it out of the 9.8 and make it a reject. It would still be attainable in the 9.6 range, but unfortunately, this particular book in a 9.8 pre-screen would be a reject. And as you can see, the impact crunch carries through the book and goes through to the back cover as well. And I noticed too, as we were going through, I'll put this one over here in the separate pile, that one of the other books in the stack showed a little bit of white on the top spine here. Looks like it bumped around in the box on the top edge. So we got the top spine here, and then the top right edge. You can see a little bit of white showing through. This is pretty minimal, something that would still be attainable in a 9.8 range, depending on the rest of the book. We'll flip it over and see if those impact crunches do affect on the back cover as well. And as you can see, this top corner goes through the entire book, so this would be going into the reject pile as well with the other one. This would take it out of the 9.8 range and put it in a 9.6. All right, so now I have these piles separated out by grade as of now, based on the corners and the top and bottom spine showing white and impact bends anywhere on the corners. This pile right here I have in front of me, along with these two piles to my right, are books that are still within a 9.8 contention versus this side over here on my left, which are the really nice looking books that have sharp corners, no color breaks. These are books that we're going to look at a little bit closer once we go through these. So now I'm going to focus on the back covers and look across.
Yep.
This right here, I hope people are paying attention to, because a lot of people think a 9.8 book is perfect. It's not. It's not. Look how many imperfections he is already. Look how much stuff he's flagging as this book is wrong with this book. Okay, and yet it can still be a 9.8. It can still be a 9.8 at the end of the day. That's the other end of the spectrum. Because some guys will look at a book and unless it's perfect. Now I understand if you want to submit a book and it looks flawless, that's the book that you want to submit because it has a higher potential chance of getting the grade that you want. That's fine. But then I'll see guys discount books and I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with this. The way I was taught, or the way it was explained to me regarding books when they get graded, every book gets 3 passes because there's 3 things that can happen and it could still be a 9.8. Okay, there could be a manufacturing defect. Okay, there could be a shipping defect, and then there could be a storage defect. Any of those those 3 will keep it from being, that keeps it out of being like a 10 or a 9.9, but it could still be a 9.8. So you can have a slightly blunted corner and it's a 9.8. Why? Because 9.8s aren't perfect. If you look, a 9.8 will translate into NM/MT, near mint/mint, meaning it's very close to mint, okay? But it's not a mint book. A mint book is a 10.0. That means based on their estimation, this book is flawless. There's nothing wrong with the exterior or interior of the book. So right here, you can see as he's going through, a 9.8 can have stuff wrong with it. Okay, and some people still got it in their minds that this can't be a 9.8 because of this. Like, no. Pay attention to what he's showing you. 9.8s are not perfect. A 9.8 is not a mint book.
Okay, now I'm going to have to say the truth of when you go to the comic book stores and how we grew up with comic books, right? So how do they explain to the people what's the difference? Because we didn't have 9.8, we had mint and near mint. So points, we had, who was it? We had Avenue H Comics, we had Dixon. We also had this guy who was at the other end of my block who's a bigger collector than both Dixon and I, this guy named Ted. And he was kind of the comic store guy that was on our block. He was the same, almost the same voice as the guy in the comic book store, but Ted might have had some issues that I can't explain right now, but it's old school neighborhood issues. So say I just got this book out of the mail, right? I got this in the book out of the mail. Nothing's done to it, nothing's happened to it. The way they would explain, I don't know if you heard of this when you were growing up, and I think this is what the problems people lie in is saying, I haven't done anything to this book. I haven't touched this book. But the fact that I'm not getting this in the factory, that makes it near mint. So the idea, I think, of which you are rightfully going against, is saying to most fans, I take this off the shelf, I take this and I haven't done anything. The comic store guys back in the past would be like, well, this is near mint because you did take it off the shelf and something could have happened. Even if you haven't seen it, you touching it turns this into near mint. If I went to the comic company, actually got a thing from this thing, what you saw, the guy had in the boxes and still found imperfections, they would say those books are mint because those books actually came right off the press and then was sealed. So I want you to, if you have anything to say to that, speak to that, because that's what I kind of grew up with. I'm not saying I agreed with it. I see this, everything he's saying makes sense. And what you're saying is 9.8, but I think a lot of people are working on the fact that the near mint or the 9.8 is a perfect book. It's just you picked it off the shelf or in a pile, which was untouched, wasn't hurt, but at the same time, it's not right from the actual printing press. What do you say to that?
I mean, that right over there is part of the problem. One of the reasons why CGC, became the third party. That what they were telling us at that point is totally wrong. And then two, it's one of the reasons why you now have a guy trying to estimate the condition of a book by looking at a CGC 9.8 book and saying, if it looks like this one, it must be a 9.8. No, this is that mentality of grading a comic was almost like it's a car. And once you drive it off the lot, it loses value. No, these are not automobiles. These are collectibles. They're not commodities. They're collectibles. And collectibles appreciate with time. Okay? They appreciate with time. Automobiles don't. Automobiles, you drive them off the lot, yes. That it's automatically, the price goes down. Comic, no. Okay, so that's pretty much what their approach was. And then, okay, you could have something fresh from the factory and it's got a defect. Okay, but it's fresh from the factory. Is that mint? Of course not. You could have something that you just took off and you look at it and it's like, hey, this is pristine. This arrived perfectly well. That's why when you find a book like Werewolf by Night 33, and everybody's looking at it and it's a 9.8, it's a big deal because the majority of those books were not inside of stores. They were on spinner racks. And so to get one that's in such high quality condition, that's a pretty big feat. I don't really feel it's the same today, but for those older books, yes, without a doubt. But the approach to grading was so subjective, and it's still subjective today. But the subjectivity of what you're talking about, where you took it off, it's no longer worth the same thing. That's an automobile. That's not a comic book.
I mean, that's that was a going thing for. I have to say that all three I said they probably said it in that same way. I'm probably not wrong. I mean, you could call the task to it. They might say I was, but at the same time, that's what was the going rate. So let's keep going. Thank you for answering that one.
Across the surface and roll my eye across the light and look at the surface for any type of scuffs, indents, bends, creases. Now, when you're looking at the same book, it is a little easier. You can go a lot faster because you're looking at the same thing over and over and over again. So it does become a little repetitious, but it makes it easier. And my eye just goes in a circle and go around the book. And then as I go through piles, I will find things that you'll see me move off to my right. And those are books that I'm taking out of 9.8 because they have a defect on them that would take them out of that grade range. Okay, now that we've completed the back cover, we're going to flip these over and do it again, but to the front. Now that I've gone through this stack, I'm going to do the same thing to two other stacks from here. Now, if you notice too, as I've been doing these, I've been bracing all these piles with a board. It's one of the safety things. The less we handle the books, the better, and it's safer on the spine edges, especially books like this where it's a cover. The cover stock is a little harder and glossier than others, so the spine stress will show up and it looks pretty bad. And we don't want to be the ones that damage the books, so we want to make sure that the books are always in the best possible condition. And as you can see, these boards that I have on these books on top of are really sturdy. These are those thicker backboards that you can buy at comic shops. I like to use these as kind of placeholders to go underneath and balance the books out. As you can tell by these piles, these are all 9/8. This was a pretty successful pre-screen so far. As I was going through the 9/8, the rejects that I pulled, you notice that some of them have these impact crunches. Some of these defects are only visible depending on how you hold the book and at what angle you're looking at it. So these crunches right here that I rejected as we were looking at the front are things that are really only visible when you're looking straight on the book. If it was off to the side, yeah, there's a little bit of white showing, but not necessarily the crunch itself will be visible. So that's why it's important for me when I look at these books to break them down step by step and look at different areas as I go. Once I get all the 9/8, what I like to do is I like to safely stack these, and I do that by staggering them in counts of 10, front to back. So as you notice, this pile is a lot cleaner and a lot safer than the one to its side, so they don't tip over and fall. So I stagger them 10 by 10, which makes it easier at the end of the day too for me to count how many, as I can just count based on the side showing. And there you go, 3 messy piles condensed into 2 nicely neat piles. So now that I have the 9/8 separated, what I'm going to do is go back to that previous pile, the one.
Okay, so hopefully everybody's been paying attention to this video and notice he's not wearing gloves.
He's not wearing gloves. That's the problem. But keep going. Sorry.
He's not wearing gloves. He doesn't have on a jeweler's eyepiece. He doesn't have a magnifying glass. There is no microscope. All of this is being done with the naked hand and the naked eye. The only thing that he has that would be different is his light source. You see how everything else behind is dark and he has pretty much a focus lamp?
Yeah.
So there's a concentration of light. Yes, that is something. I remember there was a guy, asking about grading, and he was like, oh, this, that, and the other. And I was like, I wouldn't grade this book. And he was like, why not? I was like, well, did you hold it up to the light? He's like, huh? And you hold it up to the light, and then you get to see, oh, wow, there's all this stuff going on. It's like, yeah, I don't even know if you can press that out at the end of the day. So having a sufficient light source is very important. But we can see that having your hands gloved, no, not necessary. They're not using some microscope to look for every single defect. That's a waste of time. And it would keep them from getting things back to you in a timely fashion. There's no magnifying glass, all with the naked eye. But the other thing I also want to say is that while he's put stuff in the piles and he's showing you that he's taking care with the backing board in order to move these stacks, he made 2 piles. Those books are still going to be individually graded. It's not, these are 9.8, those books still have to be looked over. Okay, they still have to be looked over individually. So don't think that they're just like, okay, this is the 9.8 stack at the end of the day. All right, so we want to keep that in mind. So he's doing, this is, again, 1 box, so on and so forth, but those books will still be individually graded.
So I think to make people feel a little bit safer, because if it's not said, no one's going to believe it. Like, by your estimation, he's at least washing his hands, right? He's going into this. Well, he's washing his hands. You have to assume that you're going to be washing your hands. The place they're doing is thoroughly clean. This is the problem. The thing that I think people were upset that they're thinking in their heads, hey, I just had a pizza, now I'm going to go grade. I got a pizza and I'm going to grade.
That is definitely the mind of a comic book guy. Okay, because the comic book guy is paranoid and cynical. So I could see all of that. But if you go to CGC at one of the shows, if you go to CGC at one of the shows and you have one of their free pre-screenings, the guy's not washing his hands after every book. He starts. He's going to be there for an hour or so. He's going to pre-screen. He's going to look over the books and such. He's going to handle everything with his hands. He's not wearing gloves. Okay. And the thing is, when I look over a book and I'm evaluating it, I actually need my hands not to be gloved because I need to be able to feel this. Because sometimes I'll feel something before I see it. Like I can feel like, wait a second. Well, I have gamer's thumb from playing video games. So I have a pretty thick callus on one of my thumbs. But overall, I was like, wait a second. I can just run my thumb down the side and realize, okay, there's a bunch of indentations right over here. I don't even need to look at it. So you need to be able to feel, because that also is going to transmit information that you won't necessarily get from just the naked eye or even before you see it. So or when I'm feeling it with my own hands as opposed to them being gloved, I can tell, oh, wait a second, this book is a little brittle. I'm going to have to handle it, I'm going to have to handle it more gently at the end of the day. The only time I could see myself using gloves is if it's something like a foil cover and I'm worried about leaving fingerprints or something of that nature. But even then, with the foil cover, the best I could just do, I could just literally take like a soft cloth and buff those out. It's not a big deal. So no, and again, this is very important because I think a lot of guys think they go back and they're getting black light. They're getting out like a black light and looking at the cover. They don't have time to do all that. They're not doing all of that for your book. Okay, naked hand, naked eye.
Well, hold on. Let me just write this back. One thing I did have issue with is you see him doing this, and you do what I would do. Aren't you going to get the impact thing when you hit the thing on the thing to straighten them out, to level it out? I'm worried about that portion. When I was looking,
that's just handling. That's just handling the books in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing. They can do stuff like that, and they know this is not going to damage the book because these books are cardstock covers. So I can do that type of thing with the cardstock cover, and I don't have to worry about them being damaged. I would not do this with other books because, yes, these books are softer because of the paper, and I'm going to have to worry about them being damaged. So, that's how, that's how that would go along. But, it's not an egg. And it's not a piece of glass. Comic books tend to be a lot. I got a box of books in from a guy recently. It was a nice set of books, and the majority of them were covered, didn't have bags or boards or anything. But they were put in a box. And because they were put in a box, just because they were protected like that, these books were in much better condition than you would have thought. A couple of the books were actually in bags. These are these older bags from like maybe the 70s, early 80s, where that crunchy plastic. And it just said near mint on the bag. Mm-hmm. Those books, once you took them out of the bag, were in great condition as compared to the ones that weren't bagged, simply because they were put in a bag. Simply because they were put in a bag. The books that we find to be the most damaged are the ones that were just thrown someplace, or for some reason they were left in a basement, they were put in the attic, air got to it, water got to it, that type of stuff, or it was read so many times, it was rolled up. Like, it was rolled up like you were going to wrap a dog on the nose or something. Those are the books that they weren't handled well. But the books tend to be very resilient if they're just treated properly. So in the hands of an expert, which I'm going to say this guy is, in the hands of an expert, those type of things shouldn't concern you. In the hands of you, the layman, when you're looking at it and saying, oh, wow, well, he did it, so I can do it too. Maybe not. Maybe not. So, again, this is somebody who knows how to handle a book.
Okay, I think my last thing is the only thing I take issue with is, and everything else has been more for humor. I will end some information, not all, obviously asking about your grading was not humor, but some of the stuff talking about us growing up was more in the time of humor and other things, straight gags. So, but the one thing I didn't like the fact that he said I'm okay with him saying this is a defect. I didn't like him saying this is a reject. I can understand he's saying rejected from 9.8, but it's just like this just brings it down. There's a defect that brings it away. It's like the going back to the humor, going back to what's happening. He said we don't shove it in the bun. We place it. You got these terms you have to watch out with comic book guys. Like that's a rejected book. I'm not buying that 9.6 book. You rejected it, so that's what I'm to bring it back.
Unfortunately, these comic collectors never get past. When it comes to comics, they never get out of 8 years old. And there are two people who always know more about comic books than they do: CGC and their best friend. So if they buy a book and they look at this book and they're like, "Hey, wow, it looks great." Your friend looks at it, "Oh man, that's trash." Your friend doesn't know what he's talking about, but your friend's opinion that you just got screwed will definitely depreciate it, which is why you're supposed to keep it to yourself. Just enjoy it for yourself, because these guys will always, that was like old comic book store stuff where you would come in, you love the book, you go over here to sell it to the guy, and he's like, oh, look at this is wrong with it, this wrong with it, but he's just trying to knock down the price that he can give you. That's all he was trying to do. There was nothing, that book would still have value. So you want to keep in mind those particular things. But yeah, the guys look at the books, and this is part of the problem, because these guys are looking at the books and they're already cagey about, oh man, see, CGC is going to do this stuff, and now all books are going to be 9.9 and 10s, and they're going to do this with the market, and it's a graph, and blah this, but, well, you got no one but yourself to blame, because you guys only want 9.9 books. Nobody, The idea that a 9.8, let's say something like New Mutants 98, the idea that a 9.8, and I'm just throwing a number out there, a 9.8 would go for $1,000, 9.8, and a 9.6 will go for $150 is ridiculous. Okay, it's utterly ridiculous, but comic book buyers have decided to put a premium on a 9.8. It's crazy. You would think that anything from a 9.0 up should get you money. No, all of the money is thrown into a 9.8. So of course, guys are going to look, well, what's better than a 9.8? 9.9. And anything that you can do to try to push yourself there, yes, because once you get a 9.9, as much as these guys may complain about it, all of them, all the guys who are still complaining will charge more money, exponentially more money than they would for a 9.8. But the highest grades, you would think 9.6, 9.8, 9.9, and a 10. You're not getting a 10. Okay? You're not getting a 10. A 10 is like, getting a ticket, golden ticket to Charlie's, the chocolate factory. You're not getting a 10. Okay? 9.9, maybe you spin the wheel, it comes up on black, you get a 9.9. 9.8s, are doable depending on the book, quality of the paper, the type of cover. Those are doable. A lot of 9.8s out there. But the fact that it ends, or the target is a 9.8, it's not a 9.6 or, a 9.4. The fact that the target is a 9.8, well, hey, what's going to happen? Guys want, if you can get a 9.9, even better, right? A 9.0 in a book like New Mutants 98 should get you some decent money. A 9.2, a 9.4 should get you, in terms of staggering, should get you more money as you scale up. And then a 9.6 should get you some, and a 9.8 should get you a little bit more, but not dramatically more. It's a 9.6. It's a 9.6. That's not an easy grade to come by either. And yet the whole idea is like, also ran, trash, but that's what comic guys do. It's the first appearance. Second appearance is trash. 9.8, 9.6 is trash. Okay. And again, if you go by the way, is this a rare book? Yes. Is 9.6 a high grade? Definitely. There's only 3 grades higher. So that's where these guys move with the whole thing. And because of that mentality, well, that's why you suffer at the end of the day. And that's where your paranoia comes in. And you're being skeptical about this. And hey, how's everything being handled? Because you've made it into this all or nothing thing. It's either a 9.8 or nothing. It's either a first appearance or nothing. Comic books are not baseball cards, okay? It's not a rookie card where Jackie Robinson can only be a rookie once. Jackie Robinson doesn't have a first appearance, second appearance, third appearance, or key issue or anything of that nature. And that approach to comics, the baseball approach or the automobile approach, always leaves guys out in the lurch, because collectors, genuine collectors, will still buy a second appearance. All right. They have no problem with it. They're collectors. They understand that, hey, this book is rarer, but this book is still rare as well. Or both of them are rare. First Incredible Hulk #1 and Incredible Hulk #2 are both rare books. The fact that Hulk #1 is his first appearance, yeah, I should definitely get more money, but this other one has significant value as well. That's where a lot of these guys don't get it, especially when it comes to their grading.
Well, I'd just like to add, you imagine the New Mutants 98, there's like at least, say what, 200,000 copies that were out in the air, and 50, there'd be another 50,000 only because it's subscription or bent like this. So they sent it like this in your subscription. So those ones obviously you can't grade. But there's only 50 that come to the people's houses already damaged. 50,000. There's 200 that were out there printed. That's a large printing of a comic book. So X-Men would be obviously the highest, somewhere 300,000 to 400,000. So there's a lot of chances to get your 9.8s on New Mutants 98. But it's definitely one of the classics.
At this point, it's going to be harder as time goes on. And I predicted this, and I'm watching it unfold, and I'm reaping the benefits of it. It's going to be harder and harder and harder to find an ungraded copy of New Mutants 98. And then I want to see how much that tilts. I really want to see how much that tilts, because I know how collectors are. Collectors, oh yeah, sure, you would love to have a CGC copy of a New Mutants 9.8, 9.9, or a 10. But everybody's grading these books. So eventually you're going to get to the point like, wait a second, if there's 200,000 copies, how many copies are still left that are ungraded? And then you have a market right there. Well, hey, can I get something that's graded 9.8 without it being encapsulated? So I actually have a readable copy, and then I have those type of things. That's another thing to look out for coming down the pike. But we're not quite here. We're not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at once you go on, okay, once you go on, again, at one point, having the graded copy, that was also the rarer thing. The rarer thing was to have the graded copy. A 9.8, that was rare. It's no longer rare. New Mutants 98 was never a rare book. When you say 200,000, I think you're being very polite. That book might have even more copies out there than that.
Yeah, definitely. Good chance.
Might easily have more copies than that. But the thing it becomes is almost like where you have newsstand copies versus direct copies, where now it becomes, wait a second, how many of these books do we actually have that are not graded?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how many books do we have, that are still in a form where they can be read at the end of the day? And that's coming, that will come. Okay, it won't come right now because these guys are still looking like, well, I can make more money, for this. But eventually, it's the collectors that drive the market, not the sellers. The sellers are usually behind in that type of stuff. But the guys who are a little bit more forward thinking will realize, wait a second, 90%, 95% of these books are all graded. I can't read any of this type of stuff. A free copy, a copy that's actually can do what it was meant to do, be read, that will actually start to have a little bit more value than it does right now. That's just a matter of time, especially with the. I told somebody this regarding Amazing Spider-Man 300. I said, what happens when all the copies are graded? They'll never grade all the copies. Yes, they will. Yes, they will. I said, everything will be graded, okay? And anything that's not graded will probably be a lower grade copy. And then the same thing happens that always happens. These books, they get damaged, they get thrown away, they get, lost or what have you. That's why, a lot of the books from the Golden Age, Silver Age, we don't have. I said, just natural attrition is going to happen. I said, so what happens when 99% of the books are graded? What happens with that? So an ungraded copy becomes even more valuable because now it becomes, oh man, these are probably one of the last ungraded copies. That sort of thing at the end of the day. So that's something to definitely keep your eye open for because they're grading everything like wildfire. The other thing I'll say is that they're grading books that don't need to be graded. If you have a copy of Amazing Spider-Man 300 and your copy is like a 4.0, you don't need to grade that book. You don't need to grade it, but they grade it anyway. And then that puts so many books in the pipeline that have to get flushed out. They got to be taken out because to be quite honest, collectors aren't interested in that type of stuff or paying a premium for a book that's not a high grade book. But the dealers are like, look, Amazing Spider-Man 300, grade everything, grade it. Hey, why do I want to pay top dollar for a 4.5?
Well, the thing is, the idea of getting rich, but at the same time, you can't get rich over everything. That's the problem that a lot of times people getting into comic books are saying, hey, this thing is going to be worth something. And then you're just like, wait. Not that. That's the thing when you were talking about earlier. When people come in the fight, they're not that book. That book is not going to make you no money. And you're like, what? You said, no, I didn't say that. Yes, you did. You can't say my books are worthless. But that's the thing of the idea of making your money. And hey, She-Hulk is out. I'm going to
never say your books are worthless, but.
But She-Hulk is out. I got to grade all my She-Hulk, Savage She-Hulks, and then next thing you know, there's no new season of She-Hulk. And it's like, well, it will get you something, but not that copy of it, not your 5.2 version of the She-Hulk #1. So, all right,
all of that type of stuff. If you graded a book, if you went and you invested in a book based on speculation for stuff like She-Hulk. Or, Ms. Marvel, I think, is a smarter bet. But, America, Ms. America, those type of characters, people still genuinely like them. So those guys are not going anywhere. They will be back. And when they come back, they'll probably be much better received than they were initially because of the things that are weighing them down. I don't know if you heard that controversy with the actress who played She-Hulk and Ryan Reynolds, but those type of things, unfortunately, transfer to the character. So if if you read the She-Hulk comic and saw the series, you obviously saw that, hey, or at least the sensational She-Hulk. You saw there was, a lot of the humor and the things that they did, breaking the fourth wall. These things were done in the comic, but they had done such a poor job in making that known and understanding that there was a connection to the comic, and they did such a great job in trolling people that the character suffered. So the character, unfortunately became besmirched with everything else that they were doing. So if you got these type of books, don't worry, hold on to them. They're still great books, and they all come back again. Books that when I bought them the first time, I thought I missed out, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this book now? It's trash. I'm never going to be able to sell it. I just put it away and focused on other books. And then, in the future, maybe a year or two in the future, I got more money for it in the future at the end of the day. And I was like, hey, I don't understand. Well, the book came back. People still liked it. They just didn't want to pay those prices at that time, especially since the bloom was off the rose. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, these things cycle back. And when they cycle back, a lot of times you can do better than what you did what you wanted in the first time. Or, at the very least, sell it, which is, for some guys, all they want to do anyway.
All right, so let's get back to it.
One that I pulled that had the nicer looking spines that had very little to no white showing at all. What we're going to do about these is we're going to go over these a little more of a fine-tooth comb than we did the other ones, because we know that these could possibly be higher contenders. So we need to look and make sure and scrutinize these books and make sure every single corner is sharp, there's no surface discrepancies, there's no nothing. And as I go through these, I will do the same thing I did before by separating a pile based on what I see.
But then that one has to be 9.8.
So as I was going through this stack and using the light to my advantage, what I'm looking for are divots or shadows caused by bends, creases, indents, crunches. And I'll show you these three right here I took out of that pile. As I was going through them, I noticed some defects here on the back cover. On these books, you can see the slight little dark shadows, these two on the bottom, particularly on the spine. These are slight little impacts, which won't take it out of 9.8, but unfortunately won't put it in the 9.9 or 10.0 category. And then this book on top here has a slight impact crunch on the top edge of the book itself. You can see in the light, it casts a slight shadow on the gloss of the book. Now that I have all of the 9.9 and higher contenders pulled out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back again to this pile and scrutinize this and look for the sharpest corners and the parts of the spine, the top and bottom spine, where there's no color breakage, no color loss anywhere, no bends, no spine stress, if there's one that does exist. If there is one, then we possibly could have a 10.0.
He wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't a 10.0 in the pile.
Let's find out. I would.
Well, I think we got one. I have them separated into three stacks. It's easier for me to show you the transition of the defects on the spine. We'll start with the 9/8 in particular. And if you look, what we have here are not only white showing where there's wear on the spine corners, but there's also bindery tears, which is a very common production flaw with books. And it's still acceptable in the 9.8 grade. And as we go to the 9.9 pile, you will notice fewer bindery tears and less white showing and more color on these spine corners. And if we transition once again down to the 10.0, you'll notice that there is none of that. Now that we're done with this first phase, these books are going to be entered into our system and given a numerical grade based on what they were given in the preliminary pre-screen, and then go to encapsulation after that, and then go to quality control, and can't wait to see what the end product looks like. And they're back. And as you can see, I'm holding a 9.9 and a 10.0 in our crystal clear case with our beautiful blue universal label. Now, I know I originally said I went over 160 copies total, but actually I went through 400 total from the printer. And out of those 400, I pulled over 300 9/8s, 79 9s, and only 7 10.0s. Now, as you can see with the 9/8s, the top and bottom spine are a little rounded, show a little bit of white and a little bit of wear. Sometimes along the spine edge, you can also notice some color flecking, where there'll be bits of the ink that will not be showing, and there'll be the white where the absence of ink is. The 9/9s, on the other hand, you'll notice very minor color showing, and the corners will always be sharp. If you look up and down along the spine edge, it's fully in color. There's no color breaks, no spine stress, none of it. In a 10.0, you'll notice every corner is sharp, the
Amy
top
Jo
and bottom
Johnson
spine
from
is
Power
perfect,
Rangers,
comes to a point
co-writer.
with 0 color breakage in any area along the spine.
That's a 10.0.
All right,
for
everyone.
me.
I hope you enjoy taking a trip through manufacturing defects and discovering the differences between a 9.8, a 9.9, and a 10.0. If you liked what you saw, please leave a comment below. If you have ideas what you'd like to see in the future, please follow us at CGC Comics and drop us a line. My name is Sean Caffrey, and thank you again.
What?
Well, you're supposed to be looking at this stuff to give people the real, and so they can come over and do good grading. You're like, Amy Jo Johnson.
10.0.
It's live action. It's like a cartoon. It's really cool actually, because like the music is like cartoon. You know what I mean? And like the special effects are great, and like the sound effects when you're like, it like goes shoo, shoo, shoo. You know, it's just great.
10.0.
Baby. Come on, we're supposed to be on the higher level, though. I agree. Amy Jo Johnson 10.
I also like to point out that we did do a video on CGC. Cal conducted the video with the gracious people at CGC, and it's maybe not our biggest, but one of our big hits on our channel. So thank you guys for that.
It's either that or talking about who would win in a fight, the Hulk or something. But yeah, that was one of our. That was one of my. I really enjoyed doing that video because I thought it was very helpful to people who were serious about grading, who really just, want to make certain, look, I want to do this right. I want to do this right. I want to submit these things. I want to get the grade that I want, and I don't want this to just be a crapshoot at the end of the day. Even though, with all that being said, it still is a crapshoot. But I did want to, again, I did want to point back to what I said. Notice he did his piles, and then after he did his piles, he went through each book individually. So this wasn't like, okay, this stack is a 9.8, take the whole stack. Like, no, each of those books still has to be looked upon individually. So the whole idea of triage was first to just say, hey, look, which ones? I mean, I've done the same thing. If a book I know has black covers and I get 8 or 9 or 10 of them, I just start with the back cover because the cover's black. And so once, I just look at the black cover. If I see a speck on any of them, all those just go to the side. Those will never be 9.8s. Anything that doesn't have that can stand. So that's your first level of triage. And then the second is to look that book over very, very carefully. With the black cover, it's easier. Probably most difficult cover might be white or something that's very glossy. But, that's what you're supposed to do in order to ascertain the condition of the book. So everything he did right there, I totally agree with. It's what I would do it's what I do on my own. When I grade, when and if I decide to grade a book, I don't do that as much as I used to. Or if I'm looking over books for someone else, if I'm doing an appraisal of some books for somebody else. So, that type, exactly what he's doing. If you want to get better at it, you have to take the time to sit down and not just, the book for a 9.8. Can you tell the difference between a 4.5 and a 6.5? Because you might have a really great book. You might have a copy of X-Men #1, and you look at it and you're like, oh man, I would love to grade this book. And then you look at what the sales are, and you notice that a 4.5 gets X amount of money and a 6.5 gets X amount of money. You're not sure which one it is. But if you're knowledgeable and you know how to grade and you're actually looking the book over carefully, you should be able to make that. You should be able to make that determination, and then you'll know, okay, if this is a 6.5, definitely I want to grade it. If I think I got a good candidate. If it's a 4.5, no, I don't need to grade it. I'm just going to sell it as is, and I'm going to make plenty of money that way. So those are things that you want to keep in mind.
All right, so before we end this, I'm looking through these comments. I'm pretty sure you can answer these things. So it's I'm going to call the people out that have this. It says Big 90 Spec 9. So they don't even open the books. What do you say to that? So I think you answered it when we watched the video, but what do you say to that?
Of course they open the book, okay? Of course they open the book. Are they going to open the book and look through every single book page in front of you? No. And then I have to admit, did you watch the video? He already said this is a preliminary thing that he's doing. This is a pre-screening. Look at the amount of things that he had to do just for the pre-screening. Then it's going to still go off and be looked at again. So, hey, you have to pay attention. This is a pre-screening to see what books are going to be good candidates for 9.8, 9.9, and 10. Okay, he pre-screens. He thinks these are going to be the books. The next guy, okay, it's still going to look that book over, and then you still have quality control. So there are levels to this at the end of the day. So, as being respectful as I can, that was not the wisest comment.
So I'm just going to mention the name and say, but you already answered it. Wait a second, from RPR's channel. Wait a second. You didn't flip through the books. How do you know there aren't all there and printed correctly? So that's another one. You already answered that. The one thing that they did point out, this one is was it Mint Hunter Comics? I think the most overlooked thing here is that they're all cardstock, heavier paper books. Brand new cardstock can get 9.9, but standard comic books can never get above 9.8. Can you answer to that? Can a regular comic book get over 9.8?
Of course, it's happened before. Cardstock comics, comic books with cardstock are very new. This is a recent thing. It's not something that never happened before, but this is a new thing to happen with such widespread. Like I was looking over a book. You remember when Marvel did the Marvel Knights line?
Yes, yeah.
I think they experimented with a couple of books in a cardstock form, and DC might have done it as well. But the majority of the books, I mean, we're not talking about the days when, of Mando paper. Okay, so these books are going to be different. If it's a modern book, they're much better put together. But you could go back and you have books that were graded 10 and they were not cardstock books. I own books that were graded 10 and they're not lenticular covers or cardstock or gloss or metal. These are just regular covered comic books, and they came back at 10. So, and again, that comment right there speaks to that comic book guy who I find to be very, very irritating. It's cynical, it's paranoid, okay, and it's not necessary. The whole idea is, oh, I'm going to have perpetual sour grapes. No, and I mean, I understand it's the internet, so you can throw all the urine and scat that you like, and nobody's going to take you to task for it. But that's just pretty much saying, oh, I'm never going to get one, and these are the reasons why, because it's rigged and it's fixed. So no, absolutely not.
So the last one I'll say, and I want to see if you agree. This person's name Wade and Slade. That 10 had a slight bend. Did you see any errors with the grading of the 10 book as a 10?
No.
All right, that's good.
Mind you, I'm saying I don't have the book in my hands.
Yes.
So for anybody to say, oh, that book didn't look like a 10, hey, dude, you didn't have that book in your hands either. Okay, so based on what I saw, it doesn't look like a 10. Oh, well, based on what I saw, it did. Did either one of us have the book in hand? No. That guy had the book in hand. That guy is a professional grader. His word is going to count for more than my word or your word in the comments. Stop it.
Well, I will say the importance of this is that though the audience have the buyer seller have like fine-tuned their picking of the CGC slabs, I think I would commend you in just at least standing with them as a company. Like, I think even if the market has gone away from people being selective to what they want, it shows doing this video also helps, in my mind, helps to say, hey, the process works, the need for it, and the thing that people wanted is there. I know they've hit some tough stories that come along, but I'm glad to at least say, hey, the basic process and what they were planning on doing was important. So I just want to end on saying that, because a lot of
one of the reasons why comics took a more valuable now than they were when we were coming up is CGC, because you had a third party that was going to be able to evaluate them, have no skin in the game. Same way they would do with the baseball cards, like, hey, we're going to evaluate these things. The collectors get them back. They'll know if the signature is authentic. Okay, they'll know if the signature is authentic. They'll know if this book is the grade that they actually think it is, and it took all the speculation and the debates out between collectors. And so stores also didn't become the final arbiter of what a grade was, and the store is also trying to sell you the book. So that was a very, very important thing. Excuse me. Look, CGC is a company. All companies, they have to take they're going to have some ups and downs, wherever it is. But, fair is fair, and their process is still very good in terms of their evaluation. And what's more, they're being upfront and showing you. They're being upfront and showing you how they do it. So you got a whole bunch of transparency when it comes to that. But again, the guys who I'm hearing the comments from do not sound like collectors. They sound like dealers, and dealers who don't believe they're going to be able to get the grades that they want. Okay, collectors, to be quite honest, most collectors don't submit books for grading. They don't. Dealers submit books for grading. Collectors tend to buy the book after it's been graded. Okay, that's myself included, because why should I submit this book for grading and I don't know if it's going to be a 9.8? Here's what I'll do. I will submit the book I'll just buy a graded copy and I'll pay the price. So the majority of books are going to be submitted. I mean, come on, look at what we just saw here. These are books that are graded. Okay, these are books that are being graded. Now, obviously being graded by, a seller or a company. There's no collector that's submitting a whole bunch of factory delivered books out for this type of thing. No, the collector's going to wait. They'll see, I'm looking for a 9.8, or I'm happy with a 9.6, or maybe I'll have the money and I'll splurge on a 10. Okay, and it goes from there.
All right. So I think any other last words, or we're.
The more, the more that you understand about the grading process by watching these type of videos and maybe getting some training, the better off you're going to be.
All right. So definitely, there's more videos on their site, and you could also watch our video on CGC. And keep grading, and as long as you have this heirloom that's stuck in this slab, it's going to be worth something. So but at the same time, you know how accountable people are. That's how we got to only the 9.8 as being the one thing. We find a way to even select out of the selected ones. But anyway,
well, let me speak to that very quickly, because that's the other end of it. Because you would have guys who would have these books, and they're thinking, this book is something with it was Ghost Rider, and with the glow in the dark cover, and it was very popular with guys in the 90s, but they didn't understand how collecting works. That yes, it was very popular in the 90s, and there are also 500,000 copies of this book, so it's not rare. Everybody who wants a copy has a copy, and so it's not very valuable. And then they come later on and they're like, oh yeah, great, I got these heirlooms I can sell, and then they're very dejected and very disappointed when they realize, this stuff is not as worth as much as what I thought it would be. That's the other aspect. You have to know the value of your collection. It shouldn't be the estimate shouldn't be what you feel in your heart, but it should be what hey, it's not hard either. Overstreet is still probably very good for most people. Check Overstreet. Recent sales on sites like eBay or McCarty, those can be a little bit misleading, because if the book is hot at the point, then you'll definitely see more money going into it, more value at the end of the day. Right 6 months before a Deadpool movie, the book may be really, really hot. And then after the movie, it drops a third of whatever it was selling. So yeah, be certain it's an heirloom first. Don't think it is. Be sure it's an heirloom first, and then do your Snoopy happy dance. And most of all, don't try to sell it for yourself. Save it for your kids. Save it for the next generation. Let them have the money, because your enjoyment was never the money. Your enjoyment was having the book in the first place.
All right. Spin a rack.
We're out.
Out.